Hey, Class, I'm going to finish the discussion of the May 1940 crisis in England when the ultimate outcome of that was that Churchill persuaded the British to stay in the war, even when things looked very dire. It's called his darkest hour. This was the lecture that I was delivering at the end of class on Thursday. I felt like I got a little bit rushed because of time constraints. I should have just stopped the class and done this podcast. So I'm gonna I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna repeat some of the things I said on Thursday, but it's such an interesting moment in the history of World War II. It's really one of the turning points in World War II in Europe, and in fact World War II generally, that it's worth kind of stopping, slowing down, and taking a close look at it. So it also brings up very interesting historical questions. Historians constantly debate among each other and among themselves. What is the driving force in history? Is it individuals? Do great individuals create history? Are they the agents of history? Or is it impersonal forces? Is it not individuals? It's the bigger forces, such as the Great Depression, I guess would be an example of that. And what you have here is you have an example where a personality, a very, very strong personality, Winston Churchill, certainly changes the course of history. Because England very easily could have made a bargain, could have negotiated, come to the negotiating table with Hitler after Hitler invaded France and Belgium and the Netherlands and defeated those three countries, those three European countries, uh, beginning in June of 1940. Just to repeat, without going into detail, Hitler does within a couple of weeks in 1940 what the Germans had failed to do in 4 years during World War One. He captures France. Especially the Germans in World War One captured about half of France, but they never, for instance, captured Paris. But Hitler, pretty amazingly, from the point of view of Germans, has this stunning victory uh, through he uses tanks, and I'll talk about kind of German logistics. But for now, let's just keep our eye on the bigger picture here. So his army moves very quickly. They're very efficient. The French break. And by mid to late May of 1940, suddenly now Germany controls France, controls Belgium, controls the Netherlands. Now, and I've got a map of this on the screen in front of me for my Zoom recording, and I'll post this map as well if you want to take a closer look at it. But this defeat of France, this incredibly rapid defeat of France, poses a major crisis for Great Britain. And the reason for that is Great Britain, as it had in World War One, sent the bulk of its army across the English Channel into France to fight the Germans. The hope was is that if the British army went into France, they could slow down the German advance, but that didn't happen at all. The Germans just rolled up France and took it very quickly. So what happens is the bulk of the British army by late May of 1940 looks like it's trapped on the continent. And if you look at this map, if you're not looking at a screen, I'll post the map on Canvas. You can see where Dunkirk is. It's a beach where the British Army had retreated. It's across from Dover, a very narrow part of the English Channel between France, Belgium, and Great Britain. It's about 350,000 British soldiers and a smattering of French soldiers and some other soldiers as well. And by May 26th, 1940, it looks like the British Army is about to be obliterated at Dunkirk. And then it's basically game over in Europe if that had happened. So what happened is that we'll never really know for sure, but Hitler could have attacked this position, But for reasons that historians still don't really understand, he called off his tanks. He called off his tank attacks. He got a little bit nervous. If he'd been more aggressive, which he'd been very successful in being aggressive, he could have moved and he could have wiped out the British army at Dunkirk. But he didn't. He kind of paused his offensive. And what this pause in the offensive, what it allowed the British to do was just to mobilize basically every ship that it had. We're talking about yachts, we're talking about naval vessels, anything beyond a rowboat. But if you look at the map, you'll see it's a very, very narrow part of the English Channel. And the British were able to get uh, their army out of France, off the European continent, and back into Great Britain to fight another day. It's a total miracle. It's not what you would call a victory, but it could have been. It saved a complete disaster, and it also allowed Great Britain to keep fighting. So that's where we're at. And in the context of the Dunkirk um, evacuation, it was very, very unclear as by May 26th, it was very unclear if this evacuation was going to work. Now, it's very, very seldom in this class that I'll get into such detail. I'll be talking about May 26th, May 27th. That's not usually my style, but there's a lot of important events that happen within that period. So just to repeat, by May 26th, the British Army looks like it's stuck in France, near the Belgian border. It looks like it's about to be obliterated by Hitler's army. Hitler pauses his attack, and this gives the British Navy and other British vessels time enough to cross the very narrow part of the English Channel, the Straits of Dover, and get the army out of the continent and back into Great Britain, allowing Britain to stay in the war. So that's the context in which Churchill, who has become prime minister, leads the fight to keep Great Britain into the war when you have very powerful voices in Great Britain saying that no, we've been defeated. We should negotiate with Hitler. Let's recognize reality. And basically, Churchill is the person that stands up to this defeatism and keeps Great Britain into the war, in the war.